Robin Gibb had one of the most recognizable voices in music history, and when he died in May 2012 at age 62, the world mourned a legend. But the story his family never wanted told had already escaped years earlier, in 2008, when a child was born inside his own household, fathered by Robin while he was still married, and the silence that followed that revelation would outlast him. By 2008, Robin had already lived through more than most musicians could survive. The disco backlash of the late 70s nearly buried the Bee Gees entirely, and the death of his twin brother Maurice in 2003 had carved a wound in the family that never fully closed. His marriage to Dwina Murphy-Gibb stretched back more than 2 decades, and the two of them had openly described their arrangement as something outside the usual definitions, a marriage that operated by its own rules. But even within that unconventional structure, what happened next crossed a boundary that no amount of open-mindedness could soften. Claire Yang worked inside the Gibb household as a housekeeper. She wasn't a celebrity, wasn't connected to the music world, and had no public presence of any kind. Over time, the professional distance between her and Robin dissolved into something neither of them kept hidden for long. When news broke in November 2008 that Claire was pregnant with Robin's child, the British press moved fast. A BG fathering a child outside his marriage, with the housekeeper inside the family home. It was the kind of story tabloids don't ignore. Robin didn't deny it. The child, a daughter named Snow Evelyn Robin Juliet Gibb, was his, and that name alone told the world everything about how he felt. Dwina faced the cameras with composure that her closest friends later described as performance more than peace. She spoke about their unconventional marriage, about different boundaries and different rules, and publicly she held the line. Behind that performance, though, people who knew her well said the damage ran deeper than anything she showed the press. A child born from an affair with a woman who had lived inside her home, that wasn't a rumor she could dismiss or a tabloid story she could wait out. It was permanent. Snow existed. And nothing about the years that followed would change that. Robin's children from his first marriage, Spencer and Melissa, suddenly had a half-sister they had never been prepared for. The extended Gibb family, already shaped by grief and the public pressures that come with decades of fame, absorbed the news quietly. No press conferences, no family statements, no televised confessions. The Gibbs closed ranks the way they always had, not loudly but completely. What went on behind that wall of silence stayed there, and what leaked out came in fragments from unnamed sources, years after the fact. Claire Yang disappeared from public life almost immediately after Snow was born. Robin reportedly set aside a trust fund for his daughter, and financial support was arranged, but Claire herself became invisible. No interviews, no photographs, no presence in the story beyond the basic facts of what had happened. She protected Snow from the spotlight with the kind of quiet determination that kept the press at a distance for years. Robin, for his part, carried on. He wrote, he recorded, he performed. He didn't apologize publicly, didn't walk back anything he'd said or done, and didn't let the headlines reshape how he presented himself to the world. But here's the thing about secrets within famous families. They don't disappear just because nobody talks about them. Snow was growing up, Robin's health was deteriorating, and the questions that had been pushed to the side in 2008 were gathering weight with every passing year. The cancer diagnosis changed everything about how people looked at Robin's final chapter. Dwina stood beside him through hospital stays, through press conferences where she updated fans on his condition, through the grinding slowdown of a man whose voice had once carried stadiums. Friends who watched that period closely said her loyalty never wavered, and neither did the wound she carried from 2008. Both things were true at once, and she held them both without letting either one fully surface. Robin's health kept declining through 2011 and into 2012, and as it did, the question of his estate became impossible to avoid. His wealth ran into the tens of millions, accumulated over a career that had lasted nearly 5 decades. The will drawn up before his illness became the subject of constant speculation. Reports suggested Snow had been left a trust fund, that Robin had made some provision for her financial security, but the details were never confirmed publicly. For a family as guarded as the Gibbs, that ambiguity wasn't accidental. Legacy, for them, meant more than money. It meant controlling the story. When Robin died on the 12th of May 2012, the grief was genuinely global. The harmonies he had built with Barry and Maurice had threaded themselves through decades of popular music, and fans from multiple generations felt the loss. Barry delivered a eulogy. Dwina stood there with the kind of composure that had by then become her signature. Spencer and Melissa mourned their father. And Snow, a child still, lost the parent whose name she carried in a way the family had never fully explained to the outside world. The funeral brought a kind of public unity, but the private fractures it papered over didn't close. Dwina became the keeper of Robin's memory in the years that followed, granting interviews about his music and their life together, guiding how the world understood his genius. On the subject of Snow, she said nothing. Not anger, not forgiveness, just nothing. The silence itself became the answer. Barry Gibb, the last surviving brother after losing Andy in 1988 and Maurice in 2003, carried the weight of the family's entire story by the time Robin passed. He never commented on Snow publicly, never addressed the scandal in any interview. Those who knew him said the grief of losing his brothers had already been immense, and the knowledge that their family story contained chapters that would never be cleanly resolved only added to that weight. Snow herself remained hidden. No documentaries, no profiles, no moments of stepping forward to claim the Gibb name in public. Claire kept her daughter away from all of it, and in that protection, Snow became something the story kept returning to, without ever quite reaching the living reminder of a decision that shaped the Gibb family's final years and left questions no one with the answers seemed willing to address. What makes Robin's story linger isn't the scandal itself. Plenty of famous men have fathered children outside their marriages. What lingers is the particular texture of the contradiction he embodied. He wrote Massachusetts, To Love Somebody, and I started a joke, songs about longing and loss, and the specific ache of human connection, while living a personal life tangled in exactly those things. The man who poured that kind of emotional precision into his music couldn't navigate the emotional geography of his own household. That gap between the artist and the person behind him is what fans still wrestle with. More than a decade after his death, the Bee Gees' catalog continues to reach new listeners. Their songs turn up in films, in television, in the background of weddings and funerals and everything in between. Robin's voice hasn't aged, but behind the voice, behind the harmonies and the decades of music, the private story remains what it always was: a wife who endured, a daughter who grew up outside the light, and a family that chose silence as its final answer. Snow Evelyn Robin, Juliette Gibb, carries her father's name in the middle of hers. Whether she ever steps forward to carry it publicly is a question only she can answer. But her existence is already written into the record, not in the music, not in the official history, but in the gaps between the things the Gibbs said and all the things they chose never to say.